Well, it was very, very cold last night. I've just heard on the radio that in parts of northern England it actually went down to -11. In my home city of Sheffield, I think the temperature went down to about -4. So all the lakes, all the commercials, all the ponds around me, around Yorkshire, are pretty much frozen. So this is the perfect opportunity to do some river fishing. Now this is a lovely spot. The River Don that runs through Sheffield city centre, really, where I live, it's very much it resembles a game river. So it's quite shallow, fast flowing. There's lots of trout there. There's some grayling. It's fantastic fishing. However, when the river gets further downstream to where we are today, heading towards Doncaster, the river has been joined by the River Rother, the River Dearne, so the river gets wider and deeper and slower. Now this section here, this is Sprotborough, and as you can see there's lots of ice there. Now this is a really interesting spot. This is Sprotborough Lock, just to give you an idea of where we are. And basically the reason why it looks so different here is because the actual river is just up there, and it actually splits. So the river splits. To the right it goes over the weir, and I have done a couple of videos below that weir, and I will be doing 1 or 2 more there this winter. So that's where the weir is, and the river continues to flow down through that other side there underneath that other bridge. However, this bit here, as you can see, is more canalised basically, and this is where the boats can navigate through. There are some lock gates there, and just behind the lock gates, that's where it then rejoins the river and it just continues downstream. So this is a really interesting spot. Just look at the ice there. If you was going to fish on there today, that'd be really dangerous. But yeah, as you can imagine, this, with it being more like a canal, it's frozen. But obviously, as you'd expect up there where it is the river, I'm expecting it to be clear of ice. I don't know how it's going to affect the fishing. I've just looked at the temperature gauge on the van and it's saying it's -3 at the moment. But obviously with moving water, the fish have got to continue to move, and if they're moving, then hopefully they're feeding. So I'm going to get my transporter loaded up. We're going to walk right the way up there and find a nice spot. The level looks about normal, and I think it's just going to be a case of being patient, but it's going to be a great opportunity to just kind of show you how we tackle rivers like this with a feeder during winter. I've just gone to get my net out of my net bag. How about that? Obviously these nets were wet from my last session the other day, and they've actually frozen solid overnight. Yeah, solid. Really easy walk up here. As you can see, it's all really smooth path. This is the canal bit. Bubbles coming up, but it is free of ice, which is the main thing. One of the great things about this stretch of river is that because it's down in such a tight sort of valley with trees either side, it very rarely gets affected by the wind. And so it's, when you're down, even when you're fishing matches here, it's just like pleasure fishing, you know, you can't see the anglers around you. Now this is what would be peg 1 on the matches that they have here. Peg 1 here, 2, 3, and it goes up that way. So as you would expect, this is an M peg. I did actually shoot a video here a couple of winters ago, and I caught some lovely fish just fishing with a feeder about halfway across. Again, that was winter. But I don't want to fish the same peg today. The water level is a lot lower than it was then. A lot lower. But as you can see, it's really shallow here. It's all icy here. You can probably just make out the booms. They're the booms just before it goes over the weir. Obviously they're there just in case any boats do drift that side. It stops them going down the weir. And to the left here is where we've just come from, where the canal bit is. Now, I'd love to fish here. I think this might be the best spot for 1 or 2 bites today, but just for variation, I'm just going to go a little bit further upstream, have a look at the pegs, see if we can get you nice and comfortable, just for a different scenery. And yeah, I mean, I've got the full pick of the pegs today. I don't think there'll be any other anglers here today, so I've got about 100 pegs to choose from. Well, I think this is going to be the best spot. I think you can see where it has obviously been muddy, where they have been having matches here at least once a week, but this is a nice wide peg. I don't know what number this is. I'm not quite sure where the numbers are. I can't remember if they're up in the tree, or I don't know what this must be. About peg 6, I would say, something like that, 6, 7. So I'm going to get down there, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get some ground bait mixed up. Didn't really know what to expect today. I didn't really know where I was going to end up, but I'm going to use a mix that I haven't used before, so I'm going to do that first, and then I'll get my my box down there, get nice and comfortable, and just get clipped up and everything, and talk you through how I'm going to tackle this peg. So the mix I'm trying today is one I've had it a while, but I just haven't had a chance to try it. This is the So Natural. It's the deep water ground bait. As you probably see there, non-fish meal. Fishing for bites today. I don't want to be too selective. It says it's dark, as we can see. Salty mix, impressive binding qualities. Deep water would suggest that it obviously binds well for deeper water. So, I'm going to get some of this mixed up. I don't think we'll need loads. And obviously I can fish with it in different consistencies. I'm only going to be fishing with a small feeder today, so I won't need a lot of this. It's not gone as dark as I thought, actually. It looks darker in the bag. It will go a little bit darker when I've added some water to it. And obviously I can fish with this really dry. If we just want to fish for bites, fish for roach and small fish up, we can obviously make it, add more water to it. It's going to be a bit more selective and fish for skimmers. But with it not being fish meal, hopefully it means that we're going to give ourselves a better chance of catching anything that swims. Well, I think the fishing is going to be a challenge, but I think one of the hardest things is going to be getting the box in down these steep banks, because I've gone down to the edge of the water and it's almost like a, what's the term for it, permafrost, is it? It's all ice on the top, but then once you break that, as you can see where I've just been to get some water, it sinks down, but it looks like the mud is only that deep and then it goes really solid. So I'm not going to go right on the edge. There's no point. I'm fishing a feeder. Just push them legs through that crust. There we go. Now just a quick tip for you, just from my experience. If you've ever got to get your box down any sort of steep banks like that, and if you've got one, always keep your cover on. Keep the seat box cover, because if you do drop your box or you fall or anything like that, it's going to make sure your drawers don't slide out, you know. Anything like that is disastrous, but if your drawer empties as well and you lose the contents of that, then that could be even worse. So it's just a safety precaution. Just want to make sure these feet are down firm. Should really have, if I'd known it was like this, I would have brought the platform, but once this is in, it's going to be solid. Now, rod wise, this is a river obviously, but it is slightly different from lots of the other rivers that we fish, in the sense that there isn't much flow when it's under normal conditions anyway, and you're not casting a long way. So all I use on here is an 11 foot, this is the commercial feeder, 11 foot. I'm not sure what tip's in there, it's probably 1.5 ounces, I think. Yeah, 1.5 ounce tip in there, which I'm going to leave in. I'm fishing with mono, and it's a really super simple free running rig, and that's all we need, because like I say, we're not going to be fishing far, and the chances are I won't need the rod up in the air, because it's not fast flowing. I'm not going to want to keep loads of line off the water like you do on a faster flowing river, so hence that's why we can get away with a shorter rod. And we may even find that we might have the rod much lower than we would do on a faster flowing river. I really don't know if we're going to need this, but let's get the net in anyway. Get that is solid. It's iced up again while it's been on the grass. So deciding where to fish on a river like this can be a bit of an issue, you know. If you are fishing a faster flowing river, generally we say just fishing the flow, and that's pretty much what I like to do on this venue. But to be fair, you've got flow from anywhere from about, I don't know, about 10 meters out to about 20 meters, so you've actually got 10 meters worth of flow there, which in relation to the width of this river is a huge percentage, isn't it? So I personally, from my experience on here, I don't get too critical about where to fish. This is quite a deep river in relation to some other rivers of this size, and so I find that I like to use that depth. In other words, I don't think it's that critical too much you know, within 5 meters of where you actually fish, because the way that you're fishing, I like to fish quite busy on here. Obviously I mix it up, but I like to be busy because I think that there's a lot of fish that are up off the bottom, and by casting more frequently you're kind of drawing the fish down, just like you do on a still water. So I don't put too much thought into where to fish. I generally like to go around the middle, because that's usually the deepest bit, or where the deepest part of the water of the river is. But the main thing for me is to make sure that it's clean of snags, to make sure that you can actually fish it. So that's the key thing for me. As you can imagine, there's so many trees around here, years and years worth of those trees and branches going in. Or obviously the bottom in some areas can be very, it can be horrible, really snaggy. So for me, that's the main issue. Just find a spot that you can fish. So that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to cast around about halfway. This is pretty much on a straight. If we were on a bend, you might have to cast further across to where the flow was, and if the water was coming under our feet, we might not have to cast as far. But on a straight like this, I'm quite happy just going about halfway, which is going to be about there. I'm just going to let that hit the bottom under its own pressure without keeping a clip on. See, that seems really nice and clean there, really nice and clean actually. Now this is not a river where we're really fishing for chub or anything like that. Obviously on those sorts of, when you're after those species, you might go looking for features, fishing near overhanging trees and all that sort of stuff, but this part of the river isn't like that. There is the odd chub in here, but this stretch is more about, you know, the other silverfish, skimmers, bream, roach, perch. That's quite deep there actually, it's deeper than what I thought. I was under the impression it got deeper the further down to the left that we go, down towards peg 1, hence that might be why it fishes better usually. But I mean, what I am going to do is I'm just going to change this bomb, because I always like to use the same bomb. I always like to use a 30-gram bottle bomb, because that means I'm being very, very uniform when it comes to finding out the depths and everything. There we go, that's a 30-grammer. And all I'm going to do, just to give you an idea, because I know lots of people are interested in this sort of thing, is just get a stopwatch reading of how deep it actually is. So this is a 30-gram bomb, and it's clipped up at about halfway. I haven't measured the distance yet. I'll stop that when it hits the bottom. 5 seconds. 5 seconds deep. So, you know, usually with a 30-gram bomb, the average that, you know, we've come to expect now is about 1 metre per second. So that would suggest it's around 5 meters deep. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to double check that, actually. Just double check that to make sure the bottom's alright. So that's a heavier bomb I've got on now, which might highlight any sort of snags or branches or anything like that. Seems okay there. Yep, that looks fine. And the other thing I'm going to do as well is, because I do expect to work the swim as well, which is something that works on lots of rivers, is do the same but a little bit further downstream, so that if we do feel we've got to drop the feeder further downstream, I can make sure it's clean there as well. That's it, I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do now is just go to the sticks. I've got the clip on, go to the sticks, find out exactly what distance that is, and then I've got a reference then, in case I've got to take the clip off for any reason. I know I can go exactly back to that same spot. Well, I've just gone to the sticks, and that distance worked out at a fraction over 19 meters. So there we go, we've got a reference now. So on the bait front, I'm going to keep everything really simple and kick off not too obviously positive with the hooks and line and stuff. Just want to see if we can get a few bites. Got the flask, the all important flask. If anyone's interested, that has got bovril in it today. Some lovely bovril with a dash of pepper. So the bait tray, I'll tell you what, I have really got lucky today. One of the things that I should have pointed out is that when you're fishing in winter, particularly when it's as cold as it is, if you can sit with that shining on you, it's going to make it much more comfortable for you. Some of these pegs here, you're sheltered from the trees, it keeps that sun off you, so that is definitely going to keep the temperature up a little bit for me. So I've got the ground bait here, which you've seen. I put that through a sieve, and it's slightly damp at the minute. I don't want it too dry, so that can go there. pop the landing net over there. Hopefully we're going to need that. And then we've got some pinkies, fluoro pinkies. These have been bagged up, so these are coming round slowly. So we've got some of those. I've got some casters, not many. There are lots of roach and perch in here. I know they like casters. A lot of the lads that fish with a pole here feed caster. Hi pal. A lot of people feed caster on here on the pole for the roach, and obviously I want to keep our options open for anything on a day like today. And then I've got some worms in there. I think there's about 1/4 kilo or just under, so there's plenty there. I'm not going to feed them at the start, you know, just in case, but it is obviously an option that we've got. Got the worm scissors there for the chopping the worms if we need them, and then I've got the hook lengths. Now as regards the actual hook choice, I'm going to kick off with, you can use barbed hooks on here, so I'm going to kick off I think with an MXB2, which is there, size 16. Got some of those tied up already. MXB2, size 16, and this is a 50cm hook length. I'm just going to start on that, probably with 2 pinkies on, just to see if there's anything there. So feeder wise, I've just climbed down the bank, so I've got 2 or 3 options here. As I've already mentioned, there isn't much flow here, so obviously that's reflected in the size and weight, more importantly the weight of the feeder. So I imagine, well I'm going to start on that one, side weighted, 20 gram. I think we'll get away with that. I have got a 30 gram version there if we do need it. Side weighted, it's plastic, solid plastic, so that means it's going to help get the feed down to the bottom, and it's side weighted. I mean, these have got ripples on, as you can see, which is great for helping hold the bottom on faster flowing rivers. That'll not really be an issue today, I wouldn't imagine, but I think 20 grams is going to be enough, but if not, I can step it up to 30. So I've got my rod rest set up. I think the positioning of those is suitable. We'll find out, we can always adjust it. So there we go, 20 grammer. Let's get one of these MXB2s on. If I am catching a better stamp of fish, obviously we'd have no idea what to expect, then I wouldn't be again stepping up to a size 14 hook. But again, you know, that will be determined by the stamp of fish and more importantly the actual hook bait. With a pinky, single maggot, double pinky, a 16 is okay. But obviously if I've got to step up to a piece of worm or a worm head or anything like that, then as you'd expect, I won't keep a 16 on, I'll step it up to a 14. But obviously that we'll find out if we can afford to be more selective in a little while when we get an idea of what's out there. Just going to have to be patient. There isn't anyone else fishing here today, well, not that I know of anyway, so there's only going to be me putting some bait in just here. So double pinky, just going to hook that nice and sharp, these hooks. These pinkies are slowly coming round. There we go, fantastic starting hook bait. Just to give you an idea of what's there, it's going to stand out in this. It's not incredibly clear water, but so I'm not going to put any worms in to start with. Just going to put, I don't know what's there, 8-10 casters and half a dozen pinkies. That's all I'm going to put in. I'll just be nice and patient. I'm not going to push it too quick, too early. I've got to admit that sun's lovely. Quite a few dog walkers today. I'll pick a far bank marker, hit that clip, put the butt of the rod in the rest. I'm not going to have too much of a bow because there isn't that much flow to pick it up, so that's just hit bottom. I'm then just going to move the rod forward and just see how much that tightens up on its own without me tightening up to it. This is the lowest I've seen it, to be fair. Even in, well, I have seen it low in summer, to be fair. On one match I came here once and I think I could hold bottom with about 10 or 15 gram that day, and that was all about small fish. See, that's all they tightened up. It is 1.5 ounce tip. I could get away with 1 ounce, you know, to be quite honest. If it was a match I would have changed it, but I'm quite happy with that. It's just a nice pleasure session on the river. Now there's no rush. I'm just gonna, you know, I'll be quite happy leaving that 5 minutes. And don't forget, you know, I can still be active without feeding loads of bait. You know, it is something that a lot of people struggle with sometimes. They think because they're having frequent casting, because they're casting a lot, they think they've always got to keep feeding. You haven't, you know, you can just put ground bait through. Quite often in winter, just some ground bait going in is enough to draw and keep 1 or 2 fish there. So I'm just going to stay quite negative and keep his eye out for that first bite. Now that's been out there about 3 minutes. I'm just about to switch the camera off, and I'm sure I've just had a really fast knock. I have left more of a bow than what I need. I'm not going to leave as much of a bow as this next time. So obviously my line's not as tight as it was, but I'm sure that was an indication. A really fast knock. Couldn't believe it. To get an indication like that first cast. Let's just pick up, see if there's one on. No. Just check that bait. That sun's lovely now. Fishing rivers like this, you know, in winter, it's just one of those things. The bait's not touched, but yeah, fishing rivers like this in winter, you've just got to be a little bit patient. Obviously, it depends on the style of fishing you're doing. If you're fishing for big fish, bream, barbel, chub, then you know you're not usually after as many bites, you know. Whereas if you're fishing like I'm doing today, where you're just fishing for bites, you're fishing for roach, dace, perch, whatever, then you know you can usually be a little bit more active. So I'm going to tighten up to this one this time. Right, that's hit the bottom now. Just going to take some of that slack out. So all I want to do at the minute is I just want to see 1 or 2 signs. Even if you don't catch anything, if you get 1 or 2 signs, there we go. We've got one. I was just tightening up to that. I cannot believe it. That's absolutely brilliant. What we got? Well, we're off the mark. How about that? We didn't have to wait long for that either, did we? That was a really quick bite. Well, that's really encouraging, isn't it? I'm sat here wondering if we're even going to get a bite. We had an indication first cast. Yeah, the bait wasn't touched, but I think that proves that it was a bite. And then we've got a fish. So, double pinky. Now, obviously that was really, really quick. So one of the things you've got to think about now is, without getting too in depth, because we're here to enjoy it, is just think about your feeder, the way that you're filling your feeder. Because obviously that bite was really quick, and if I'd packed my ground bait in too tight, then the ground bait wouldn't have had a chance to empty on the spot out there where my line clip is. You know, that could have easily emptied on the way back towards me, and we don't want that, do we? You know, we want our bait to empty on the spot. So this cast, I haven't squeezed or squoze the ground bait in anywhere near as tight, because if I do get a bite straight away like we did last time, then I want that ground bait to empty right on the spot, right where my line clip is. Just, you know, you've got to think about these things. Obviously this is only a pleasure session, but even if you're pleasure fishing, it's going to help you, you know, catch more fish, you know. And let's face it, if you can keep getting bites at this time of year, when it's sub-zero temperatures, it's going to make it much more enjoyable for you, isn't it? And you know, when you have caught a few fish, when you've had a few bites, if you've enjoyed it, and you want to be a little bit more selective as you get later on in the session, see if you can catch a bigger fish, then obviously you can do that, you know, and you've still had a great day's fishing. So I haven't had a sign on that cast, but I'm a massive believer that if you're going to catch a fish as quick as that, particularly that species, then that usually suggests that there are a few there. You know, you won't expect fish like that to be on their own, but that's good, that's great. And all I'm going to do is just keep a few pinkies, keep a few casters going in, just to see if we can get a few bites, and then we could be a bit more selective if we want, try and get a bigger fish. We've obviously got the worms. I could try a big piece of worm head, multiple pinkies, you know, 3-4 pinkies even, try and catch a skimmer or a bream. But at the moment that's a great start, and that sun's keeping it really nice and warm, but I think the sun's going to go around that way, so I think soon I am going to be sat in the shade, where I think I'm going to I'll definitely feel a difference when that sun goes behind that tree. I've got to admit, this bovril is absolutely beautiful on a day like today. Just helps keeps the body temperature up. It's beautiful. Just had another little knock. I'm on my... Is that on? I thought we'd up that. I don't know if it's on. We've got it. Another little fish. The bovril bite. What we got this time? Is that a roach? Who's going to complain? Hey, getting bites in these conditions. Pop him in the net. That's all I'll do. Just keep doing what I'm doing. See if it makes any difference to the stamp of fish. See if anything changes. That one had been out there about 3 or 4 minutes. Just nice and patient. Obviously, I've got some casters to try. I've got some worms, but And I think this choice of ground bait mix is going to really help, I think, because it's obviously much less selective. You know, it's rather than going down the fish meal route. It's going to keep a few freebies going in. I think I'm going to have to scale the size of this feeder down now. I've had probably 4 or 5 casts now, and I don't want to just keep piling this. It just seems it's a great size feeder to kick off with. But if you're catching small fish and you're catching them quite, not quickly, but quite frequently, then obviously I don't want to keep piling loads and loads of ground bait in, because the fish, you know, with a mix like this, the fish can obviously eat that, you know, and if they are small fish like they are, then I don't want them to get preoccupied in eating the ground bait and filling up on that. So I can scale the feeder back, still keep the same sort of weight, 15 or 20 gram, but I'm just going to scale it down on the next cast. So I just think that's going to be a little bit more suited to the style of fishing we're doing and the stamp of fish that we're catching. Well, I've just had another nice rattle. There we go, that's our 3rd fish now. Lovely winter fishing, see the 2 pinkies there. And the great thing as well is, which can be, nearly missed the net over that one. The great thing as well is that we're hooking the bites. You know, with fish that size on a feeder, it can be an issue that, you know, they can be difficult to hit the bites. So that's good, it's telling us that the rig's working and everything. So I'll just scale that feeder down now. Still 20 gram, keep a few pinkies going in. Much smaller, that feeder, obviously it's more discreet, but it means we're not putting as much of that ground bait through. That's on. That was a much more positive bite, that one. Yeah, that was much more positive. I was just thinking that obviously if I had got a 1 ounce tip on, these bites would be much more obvious. I'm fishing with mono, not braid, but this tip is 1.5 ounces. Look at that beauty. There are pike in here as well, so I wouldn't be surprised if one of those made an appearance. That's a nice fish, isn't it? It's more like a caster fish, that one. Beautiful, great condition, really positive bite as well. Well, I didn't expect a response quite like this. I've scaled that feeder down now, and I've got to admit it does seem far better. You know, it's obviously going in a bit more discreet when it hits the, you know, hits the surface, but it just feels much better as regards the volume of ground bait and everything that's going in. If I was sat waiting 10 minutes for bites, like you might be doing on certain venues for certain species, then, you know, I wouldn't have an issue with a bigger feeder. But when you're casting as frequently as what I am doing, then, you know, just think about the size of your feeder and how much, not so much the actual freebies you're putting in, because you can control that, but just think about the amount of ground bait that's going in, especially with a mix like this that's got some feed in it. Well, it'll be interesting to see if anything changes now. We obviously know we can get 1 or 2 bites, which is absolutely brilliant on a day like today. But if we can find a different species or a different stamp, then that'd make it even better, wouldn't it? But at the minute I haven't made any changes other than the feeder. Still got double pinky on, still got pinkies and casters going in. And I will put worm through in a while, just to try it. Well, it's so quiet here today. That sun's out, it's lovely, we can hear the birds whistling. The robin's been, that's a better bite. That was a much more positive, slower bite. It's not a big fish. If I'd missed that, I would have been kicking myself, thinking, was it a bigger fish? Well, can't complain at this, can we? The robin keeps coming to visit me. He's enjoying the pinkies, or she. Well, we've had more bites now than I expected we'd get all day. And I honestly think a lot of that is to do with this ground bait, I really do. With it being a non-fish meal mix. You know, and that's why these sorts of mixes are great, especially on natural venues where you just want to get some bites and you want to fish for anything. I'm sure there'll be comments underneath this video asking me about skimmers and bream, and yeah, I mean, if I was targeting those fish exclusively on here or on any English river, I would be using a fish meal mix. Well, certainly a pellet based one. This is beautiful now, really nice. This is a day ticket stretch. If anyone is interested, it's Rotherham and District, the bailiff just comes round on the bank for the ticket. That was a bite there straight away, really fast knock. And these are the permanent match pegs as well, so if you see any match reports or any matches that take place at Sprotborough, that's this stretch here. I think this is about peg 6, I think. I haven't gone looking for the peg number. Maybe I walked past it or didn't spot it in the grass, but it's about that, so just so you know where we are. Now, one of the things that you can do, obviously, is lengthen that hook length. Now, if I was struggling for bites, then I would have switched to a 1 metre tail, a 1 metre hook length, just to give it more fall, or give that hook bait more time to fall. So if those fish are in the upper layers, it gives them more time to find it, pick it out. And that would also mean that it to present the hook bait further away from the feeder in case the fish were really, really cagey. So that would be the general rule of thumb. If you're not getting any bites, lengthen the hook length. If you're missing bites, then you can shorten the hook length. To generalise it, that's what we normally do. And at the minute, as you know, I've still got this 50 centimetre on, and we're getting bites on that. I missed two indications, so if that was to continue, I'd consider shortening it. Well, that sun's gone behind that tree now, and it's gone really, really cold down there. It's still on me up here, so it's time for a change. Change over to the super warm Sherpa. I think the neck warmer's going on as well. It's really dropped now. What I'm going to do is, I can get bites. There's quite a few of those small fish feeding. If I put a pinky on, or double pinky, I can get a bite. Funnily enough, I either get a bite straight away, or I have to wait 5 or 10 minutes for it. But if I leave it in long enough, it's going to go. All the fish are the same stamp. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to chop a few worms up. I'm going to put a bigger hook on and just be more selective. See if we can find a bigger fish or a different species. That's better. So all I'm going to do, I'm just going to pick out a few worms. I'm going to step up that hook size as well. I'm not going to do anything fancy with these. I'm just going to pick a few out. These are just normal dendras. They're quite mixed actually. Some small ones in there, some larger ones, but all I'm going to do is just chop them down and then fish with a picture worm on the hook. That's it. So I'm just switching that hook length. This is a 14 MXB2, 50 centimetres long again. And this will enable us to fish with a bigger bait. There we go. And what I'll do is I'm just going to kick off with a worm head. Not a massive one, but any fish can eat that, can't it? Let's see if we can pick one out. Let's do that. There we go. So 14's much better suited to this hook bait. I'm just going to nip that off a little bit, nip it off there and put that worm in the chopping pot. There we go. Be a bit more selective now. Obviously we could put a full worm on if we need to, so I'm just going to put a nice pinch of that worm in. I think what we'll do is we'll cut the pinkies out. So all we're putting in there, as you can see, is chopped worm and caster. Much more selective. I'm going to keep the small feeder on, and be interesting to see what happens. As you'd expect, I won't expect too much to happen. Obviously we've got a bigger hook bait on, so that could get a quick fish. But as regards the actual worm going in, obviously this is the first cast with worm, so it might take a few casts for us to see any sort of response or a reaction to that worm going in. So obviously at the minute that worm is still really in the feeder, so it might take a few casts. Just got to persevere with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably have three quite quick casts, just to get some of that worm in there, get some of that smell of the worm in, the juices. I'll probably just have 2 minute casts, 3 2-minute casts. I'll do that, and then after that I can then sit and wait. Once I know that there's some worm on the bottom, that some of that juice is there, and I'll sit and wait, you know, be a bit more patient then. We've hooked one. It feels like it's the same sort of fish. Might be a tiny bit bigger. Obviously it wasn't a massive piece of worm or anything like that, but a little bit better. That's a better stamp, isn't it? That is a bigger stamp. I know it's not a huge fish. We often see that just by making a simple change like that, all of a sudden you start catching bigger fish that were already there, you know, you just weren't catching them on the smaller baits. So I'm going to leave that. No, I'm going to put a fresh bit of worm on. I'm going to put a slightly bigger piece on this time. Another worm head again. Just nip that in the top there, and then nip it off. Put the rest in the choppy pot. Don't want to waste it. So we're just going to. So we've had one feed full. That worm has gone in now, hasn't it? So obviously we've just retrieved that feeder. So some worm's gone in. All those juices are in there as well. I haven't sieved any of the juice off, you know, like we sometimes do. You know, see all the juices are still in there. So we'll see what's going to happen to this. We all know that worms sometimes, for whatever reason, can be the kiss of death, you know, on some venues. That's why we don't, on some occasions, or lots of occasions, we don't feed it right at the beginning, at the start of a session, if you don't know what it's going to be like, because you don't want to risk ruining your swim straight away, you know. Whereas if you haven't put it in and you're still not catching, well, you can't blame the worm then, can you? The small fish are still there. They're not great big fish, but they are a better stamp on the worm, aren't they? Well, those small fish are still there, you know. I can just sit and wait. I can obviously leave it in longer now with a bigger bait on. If I put a worm head on, I can still catch a small fish, albeit they are a slightly better stamp. Not many of them, to be fair, nowhere near as many bites as when I was fishing with pinkies. I've had 2 or 3 casts with half a dendron, or the tail end of a worm about that long, and all you get with that is it sits there and sits there, and you leave it and leave it and leave it, and you just keep doing a quick flick like that, just as though it's those small fish just having a go at it, and it's obviously too big for them to swallow, so I'm not coming back with any fish on that. So there are still small fish there. I don't know if there are any big fish present, but what I have noticed is that you probably can't make it out, I don't know, but the flow has actually increased. Now when I first got here, I actually put a marker in the edge, just like I always do, just so that you can see if the level of the water's changing, and it's come up a little tiny bit, I'd say. That was a rattle then, but the flow has definitely increased, so I've got to leave more of a bow in the line now. I've still got that 20 gram feeder on, but I'm having to leave a bow in the line now, just to allow for that extra little bit of flow. So whether that's affected the fishing or not, I don't know, but quite often that can obviously affect things. Well, that sun's gone down behind the tree. You can probably tell how it's changed now. The temperature's really dropped. But being able to get a bite every single cast, as you've seen, certainly with pinkies and maggots. We've obviously tried to catch some better stamp fish, but if you just wanted a day's fishing, we could have caught those fish all day. We've had plenty of bites for such a severely cold day, such conditions, and you can probably tell why this stretch is so good for float fishing. But to say in some parts of North Yorkshire it was -11 last night, and the ice is still here, I think it goes to show what kind of winter sport you can have even in the harshest conditions. If you'd like to see the video of me when I was fishing Peg 1, which is just down here where I caught some lovely fish, I'll put that video on screen for you. But I just hope you've enjoyed this nice winter river session.